What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Montana Method. Once again, your host, as always, Nelson Rodriguez Jr., coming at you with some special content here. Pre-recorded episode, pre-recorded content. Haven't really done this. Gonna start switching to some 10-15 minute videos where I just go in on a topic. If you do like it, please like, subscribe to the channel, comment below, tell me if you want to hear more of these kind of videos, this kind of stuff. I'll definitely get to it and do more of it. Now, what am I going to talk about today? Of course, you all know the whole theme of my brand and my channel is I love Scarface. Scarface, Tony Montana, everything that has to do with that story to me is the most inspiring, most riveting story that I have ever heard and I have ever been able to watch on film. So today, after much demand from fans and people who watch the podcast and have read my book, Montana Method, I am going to go over the 7 reasons why Scarface, and more specifically Tony Montana, is the GOAT. All right, I'm going to go over the 7 reasons why I feel this is the greatest film that's ever been made. It's the greatest film that's ever graced the cinema. Some of you guys are already rolling your eyes and saying a bunch of stuff. I get it. You have your opinion. I got mine. Let's agree to disagree. But if you're one of those who does believe this is one of the greatest films that's ever been made, let's get to it. So reason number 1, it was made in the 80s, guys. Let's face it. The 80s was the golden era of Miami. Anyone who lived in that era will tell you everybody was making money. Everything was cheap. Gas was less than $1. America was kicking ass and taking names. It was a golden era in American history as well. Everything was going well. Things were good. Reagan was kicking ass. Obviously, there was a huge drug trade issue, which is pretty much the premise of Scarface and why Miami was making so much money back then. However, exclude the drugs and the murder, a lot of great things were happening in Miami. It was such a good setting for any film, not just Scarface, to place their story because there was so much possibility. No one really knew how far things can go in a person's life. There was so much that you can imagine because of the abundance and everything that was going on. The banks were making a lot of money. The average bank back then used to make $12 million a year, and the average bank in Miami around that time was making like $300 million a year. You can go on and on and on. I have friends who were tailors, car dealers, jewelers, you name it. I know somebody back then who had something going on and they made money, they prospered. Things in Miami were just on another level. Everybody wanted to be here. It's actually very similar to today, actually, how everyone's moving here. So the 80s is the best era to place a setting, let alone it actually be made in the 80s. Shows like Stranger Things should tell you that people love nostalgia. People love the 80s. Stranger Things did well because the setting was in the 80s. That did great. With the rise of Stranger Things and how well it did, it should show you that people really love that era of America. Now, reason number 2, the underdog and the rise to power story. Everybody loves to see the story of a guy who comes from nothing and has nothing and brings it to another level, takes his life to where no one else is really living. And of course, Scarface, Tony Montana is that. It's the story of a guy who comes from Cuba on a boat with over 100,000 other Cubans, has holes in his shoes, has nothing but the clothes on his back, lives in a tent under a bridge under I-95, which, by the way, my mother was one of those people. This is another reason why it's such a good film, because it was based on real events that happened. And I personally know dozens, if not hundreds of people that went through those same events and are living great lives today. It's so inspiring to see someone come from nothing, have nothing, barely speak English. A year, 2, 3 years later, they're rich and powerful and have all these things. People love a good underdog story, and that's never going to go away. Tony Montana is the ultimate underdog. He was counted out from the beginning. He lived his life his way until the very end, and he did everything he wanted and more. I'm telling you, the underdog story. There's nothing like it. There's no other story like it. Reason number 3, gangster flicks just hit different. If you talk to anybody, more than likely on their top 5, top 10, they're gonna have at least one gangster movie. Scarface is just it. These classic gangster films like Godfather, Scarface, Casino, Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Godfather Part 2. You go on and on and on about all these gangster flicks, and there's something about the mix of the story with the rise to power, with their lifestyle. They're different from the rest of society, and people are really intrigued by these gangster stories and the way these people choose to live their lives. Gangster flicks just hit different, guys. I have a custom-made painting in my room that I'll actually put somewhere up on the video probably, that has every gangster film you can think of all painted into one mural. It's beautiful, and it represents success, and it does represent America to some extent. It just represents our culture, who we are. Gangsters and gangster films specifically history, they culminate so many different things that people find interesting, right? Aside from money, power, and crime and all that stuff, it's that code they have, the way they live, and it's so many things. Gangster films are so intriguing. That's number 3 of why Scarface is the greatest movie ever made. Reason number 4. It's the only reboot in history that outdid the original. Most of you guys don't even know that Scarface is a reboot. The original Scarface was made in 1932. Most people think, and the people who are aware that this is a reboot, most people think that James Cagney was the original star, and he actually wasn't. It was actually Paul Mooney. And in 1932, Scarface was made, and it was about an Italian gangster who very similar, it's a very similar story. His rise to power and his fall into darkness, and he dies at the end of the movie, just like Tony Montana. This is by far the only reboot I can think of that completely outdid the original and became a cult classic. Not just outdid the original, became a classic film in its own right. It became one of the most iconic films in history. That alone deserves merit. Everybody knows nowadays every film is a reboot, every film a superhero flick, and it's all the same, and they're just regurgitating the same stuff over and over and over again. For a guy like Oliver Stone and Brian De Palma and Al Pacino to come together and do a reboot and turn it into a cult classic, that just speaks to them and the kind of work they put into their craft. Really, they're just masters. Reason number 5. Scarface has stood the test of time again and again and again. So this past December, in December of 2023, there was a 40-year anniversary celebration here at the Fontainebleau in Miami. Sold out. Tables were going for $1,000. Al Pacino himself showed up at the event. It was a very special event. I regret not being able to go. If I would have met Al Pacino, I don't know. That's on my bucket list for sure. My life would have been completed. That just goes to show you that even though it's been 40 years, literally 40-year anniversary, Scarface came out in December of 1983. 40 years later, people are still willing to spend that kind of money to be around Al Pacino and celebrate the movie and talk about his experience making the movie. Let's take it a step further. Streaming services, right? This is an older movie, so it's hopped around from streaming service to streaming service to streaming service. I remember when it first went on Netflix, it popped up to the top 10 and it was up there for weeks, if not months. It's crazy how old this movie is and how it just stands the test of time and how newer generations watch it and they still find it enjoyable. To be that kind of film that transcends time and multiple generations are in love with it, there's nothing like it, really. It's definitely a strong reason of the top 7 reasons why it's the greatest film ever made. Funny enough, fun fact, Fontainebleau is actually one of the locations where the film was recorded. The scene where Tony's with Manny and they're walking around the pool and takes his tongue out to the chick and he gets slapped, all that was actually recorded on site at the Fontainebleau. So it was crazy that 40 years later, they're actually having a party celebrating the 40-year anniversary of Scarface being made. So they actually did it at a place where they filmed the scene in the movie. That's crazy. Reason number 6. Tony Montana is the only fictional Cuban character that you can think of. The only other person that can come to mind is who? Ricky Ricardo, but he wasn't really fictional. He was Cuban in real life and he was Cuban in I Love Lucy. And I'll take it a step further. He became iconic. It wasn't just the only fictional Cuban character you can think of. He's an iconic Cuban character. And that is why you might understand why Scarface to Cubans is so cool, because we don't get displayed in cinema that often. It's very rare. And this became a classic film in American history. Classic film around the world. I mean, how many languages has this film been translated into? I'm sure there's stories of people who speak Spanish who've seen this. I remember Patrick Bet-David saying he watched it in Farsi when he was a kid back in his country. You name it. There's people from all walks of life who've seen this movie in every single language. It's an international sensation. It has been for years. And the fact that they based it on a Cuban, and of course, this leads into reason number 7, Al Pacino. Al Pacino is the greatest actor to have ever lived. He's the greatest actor to have ever graced cinema. The guys that you can compare him with are like De Niro and Joe Pesci. There's a handful of other guys you can compare him to. Al Pacino is the greatest of all time. He's the greatest actor to ever grace the theater, to grace a set, a TV. He's only the one TV series, which is Hunters. Al Pacino, the job he did to play a Cuban and play it so well. He did our accent really well.
Who put this thing together? Me! That's who! Who do I trust? Me!
He got our mannerisms, our slang, our words that we use. Everything, he got it down packed. Most people don't even know that Al Pacino, during the making of Scarface, actually made all of the staff that spoke Spanish speak to him in Spanish, solely in Spanish.
He said, maybe I don't understand, but just talk to me in Spanish. So I did. For the entire picture, Al Pacino and John Alonzo spoke Spanish.
He was Spanish himself, so when I was off with an accent, I asked John if he would help me. And I know that he spoke to me in Spanish.
He didn't understand what they were saying, but he said that that used to keep him in the mentality of a Cuban, which is really interesting. So imagine Al Pacino trying to stay in the mentality of a Cuban and walking around set during breaks and in between scenes where everyone's speaking to him in Spanish and he doesn't even know what they're saying, but he's that committed. He's a method actor. I mean, the guy's the greatest to ever do it, period, in any film. Doesn't matter what film you're talking about, all his films. He's just the best. Even in the one scene where he spoke Spanish, in the scene where he's up in New York and he's sitting with the hitman from Sosa's camp in the car waiting for the guy to come out, and then the guy comes out with his kids and his wife and all. You guys know what happens in that scene, but he speaks Spanish in one scene when he slaps the hitman and he tells him,
Olvide eso. Mandamos este tipo solo, sin mujer y sin hijo. Olvide eso.
Olvídate eso, sin mujer y sin hijo. He does it just like us, just like a Cuban. Hats off to Al Pacino. I love what he did to this film. It is a film that has eternally inspired me in my own life. Tony Montana taught me that with grit, with determination, and with drive, you can get anything you want in life. Don't take shit from anybody, and you go out your way. If you're gonna lose, you go out your way. Never quit until the bloody end, even if you're gonna lose. It is what it is. You go out like a gangster. He was so confident. He knew what he wanted. He was so sure of himself. There's so many different lessons I can tell you about this character. That's it, guys. Those are the 7 reasons why Scarface, more specifically Tony Montana, is the greatest of all time. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below. Let me know what other movies you'd like for me to review. I'm a huge movie buff. I love TV series. Just let me know if you like this kind of content, and I'll keep doing it. As always, guys, push it to the limit. The world is yours. If you're not chasing a dream, life is meaningless, guys. Say goodnight to the bad guy.